I'm Julia Gaw. I'm non-binary and go by they, them pronouns. And you're watching my personal project video. Sparkles. Throughout my entire life, I've always enjoyed watching films like Shrek movies, Toy Story, Frozen, and basically almost all of the Studio Ghibli movies. These kind of movies, as you probably already know, are called animated movies. Most of them are animated in either 2D or 3D, and I always wondered how exactly they were made. Animation is an incredibly versatile and diverse medium, giving us an interesting set of tools to create visual imagery. Through animation, almost anything is possible to create. For example, you could create a video of a doctor riding a giant cat through space if you really wanted. Animation is a very broad umbrella term for the entire field of moving imagery. That's from cartoons to claymation to CGI. You can go into detail on just about everything in animation. However, I will only be talking about specifically the production process of 2D and 3D animation. That is essentially what are the main steps animators go through to make a film. 2D and 3D animation are similar in some ways, but they're also different and are made using different techniques. This video aims to show you how the production processes are different but also the same. I will not, however, be explaining how to animate, because that's just too much. Before we can get into what the process is, we actually need to know what exactly we're talking about. Animation, as I said before, is an umbrella term for many different styles of animating. The main ones I'll be talking about is 2D and 3D animation. 2D, or traditional animation, is an animation technique in which each frame is made by hand, and then the frames are spliced together to create a moving image. Objects in 2D animation move up, down, left, and right in relation to the camera. They're created in 2 dimensions, hence the name 2D. An artist can create the illusion that an object is closer or further away from the camera. This style of animating is the oldest and is typically made at 24 frames per second. You can see 2D animation in series or films like The Amazing World of Gumball, The Owl House, and basically all old Disney films like Sleeping Beauty or Princess and the Frog. It's used often in films, however, another place 2D animation can be seen is in video games. Now on to 3D animation. 3D animation, aka computer animation, also known as 3D computer animation, is made in 3 dimensions on a computer. 3D animation is the process of making moving images in a 3-dimensional environment, which gives the illusion that these digital objects are moving through a 3D space. It's usually made using 3D models that are then manipulated to make them look like they are moving. 3D animation is normally animated at 30 frames per second, making the movements seem more fluid than they would in 2D animation. Most of us know this style of animating through films like Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, or any of the recent Disney animated movies like Frozen or Wreck-It Ralph. Big studios like DreamWorks, Pixar, and now Disney make strictly 3D animated films. 3D animation is also commonly used in other contexts like commercials and video games. Be careful. 3D animation is not to be confused with CGI. CGI means computer-generated imagery, which is an umbrella term for any static or moving visual element created with a computer or software. It technically refers to any piece of art, whether 2D or 3D, that veers away from raw footage or manual composition, and instead relies on technologies to render its form. All of these are examples of CGI. Now, this video is about 2D and 3D animation, however, it's also worth mentioning the other common style of animating, which is stop-motion animation. Stop-motion animation is an animating technique in which a physical object is moved in small increments and photographed at every step. It's very similar to 2D animation, but instead of drawings being made, it's physical objects. One of the biggest and well-known studios for stop-motion animation is Lakia Studios. You may know them through films such as Coraline, The Corpse Bride, Kubo and the Two Strings, or Box Trolls. There are of course many other examples of stop-motion animated films like Shaun the Sheep or Wallace and Gromit, which are made using a technique called claymation. Unfortunately, this video is still about 2D and 3D animation, so you won't be hearing much about stop-motion aside from maybe the occasional mention. Typically, movies tend to stick to their respective styles. However, sometimes producers mix and match the tools, layering 2D animation over 3D animation to give it a more hand-drawn look. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a good example because they layer 2D animation aspects over 3D animation to appear more similar to the comic book inspiration. Arcane also does this, but they mix the two mediums through painting most of the backgrounds in 2D, while the characters are modeled and animated in 3D. It also pushes the show's style, giving it a more painterly look. Now, back to the process. 2D animation is very old, and traditionally, animation used to be made on paper because technologies like tablets, computers, and animation programs just simply didn't exist yet. On the other hand, 3D animation is quite new, only existing for about the past 60 years or so. In this video, I'm not going to explaining how animators have made the transition from a paper to a digital process. Now, the animation production process, or production pipeline as I like calling it, can be chunked up into three main parts: pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production essentially deals with the preparation needed before the animation happens. For example, me writing the script right now is part of the pre-production process. Production is basically the animating part, and post-production is the stuff that happens afterwards, like putting the whole film together and adding effects. In pre-production, there's a lot that should get done before the actual animating part of animation starts. The first thing that we need to do to make an animation is develop an idea or story and figure out what exactly you plan to animate. This part of the pre-production stage is essential to the animating process. With the story idea, you can then begin to work on the screenplay or script of your film. This contains what the characters are going to say along with stage directions. It can also help break down the story into scenes and shots. Then comes storyboarding. A storyboard is similar to a comic book, with many panels of sequential drawings that map out the story. It's kind of difficult to describe exactly what a storyboard is, so here's an image of what they look like. In pre-production, after the storyboard is finished, this is when voice actors record their dialogue and where sound effects are added so the animators have a proper reference to sync characters to while animating. Oftentimes, temporary audio is recorded to be used at this stage instead of the proper one. This is called a scratch track. With the storyboard completed and the scratch track recorded, the panels and the audio are edited together to see how it would flow as a movie. This is called an animatic. The animatic acts as a blueprint for the final edit of the film and helps to figure out how much animation is needed to be produced for each shot. Up until this point, the process is relatively the same with 2D and 3D, and even in stop-motion animation. Another thing that happens during pre-production is designing and modeling. Designing includes character design, in which model sheets are produced, and color styling, which gives an idea of the overall color palette of the production. Character modeling fleshes out the details of a character's appearance by modeling them in their respective mediums. Characters are typically modeled into character sheets, which are then used as a reference for their character during production. In 2D animation, it's typically done by drawing the character multiple times in different poses or facial expressions. Here's a good example sheet for Gogo Tamago from Big Hero 6. In 3D animation, it's done in a 3D software package, and there are many ways to 3D model. To name a few methods to 3D model, there is assembling or molding existing geometry into new shapes, creating a wire framework, then webbing a surface over it, or scanning real-world sculptures with a 3D scanner. The next step in pre-production is rigging. Rigging in animation is when the rig is the skeleton structure built to identify the virtual bones that allow the model to move. Think of it as basically creating a virtual puppet. It can be done in both 2D and 3D animation. However, rigs are not typically used in 2D traditional animation, but it can be used in other styles of 2D animation. In 3D animation, the character model is given bones and other rigging systems in order to manipulate it. Other elements such as muscles, hair, clothes, and even eyes need to be rigged. It can be really tricky and laborious to make sure the 3D mesh moves the right way. Texturing also happens at this stage. In 2D animation, animators normally use a flat or gradient color, but in 3D animation, it can be much different. In 3D, it can be anything from a solid color to hand-painted or even photographic imagery. The way light behaves across the surface is also controlled through texturing. A film with a good example of detailed texturing is Encanto from Disney. If you look close enough, you can see the fine details or textures of Maribel's dress. Pre-visualization can also happen during the pre-production stage, although it's typically only used in 3D animation or live-action films. In pre-visualization, digital stand-ins are used to work out the timing, movement, and positions in the 3D space. This allows any issues that the shot presents to be worked out before rendering the final product. Once the pre-production stage is complete, the animators then move on to the production stage. First, the animators have to work on the layout of the animation. They work on both the background layout and how exactly the shots play out. For 2D, animators typically hand paint backgrounds, but in 3D, the backgrounds are normally 3D modeled, and then the character models are placed in the 3D space. This step is a little bit funky and can sometimes be included in pre-production, but honestly, that's not very important. The next step in the animation process is the actual animating itself. So let's break it down. First, key poses need to be created. These block out the character's position in a setting and show what the character's extreme points of action are. Then comes in-betweening, or tweening if you prefer. Tweening is the creation of images that go between the keyframes to smooth out its motion. At this point, the animation is not fully completed and is sketchy. This is known as a pencil test. Anyway, the rough animation lines are then traced over with clean fluid lines. This is called inking. Then the characters are painted, and the animated characters get combined with the background. In 3D animation, a rigged character is manipulated by the animator like a virtual puppet. Similar to 2D, the characters need to be given key positions, which are then, unlike 2D, automatically in-betweened by the animation software. 3D animation can often be a lot more technical than 2D, as it deals with concepts such as X, Y, and Z coordinates and numeric sliders to control the puppet. It can get super complicated. The last job to do in the production stage is rendering and lighting. Technically, lighting refers to the placement of lights in a setting, and the effect those have on the subjects in the frame. The actual lighting effects for 2D animation is commonly added afterwards and referred to as special or visual effects. So for now, I'm just going to talk about 3D animation rendering. 3D animations need to be rendered, which basically means the digital frames need to be generated by a computer. Now, this can take a very long time or a short amount of time, but it all depends on how much calculation the computer must do to produce the final image. That wraps up the production stage. From here, we can finally move on to post-production. One of the first things animators add in post-production are special effects. Wait. There are two different abbreviations. They are SFX and VFX. Special effects take place in live-action films and happen during the filming process, whereas visual effects are created and added in the post-production stage of filmmaking. However, in 2D and 3D animation, the definitions are a bit more convoluted, and technically they merge together. Although 2D animation is quirky, where elements like fire, smoke, and water are considered effects, but so are basic shadows and highlights, even though those are part of lighting. Special effects can make the unbelievable seem real, like a glowing sword, or a nuclear explosion in your hometown. Sadly though, most special effects are boring, such as extending a small set to look massive, like in stop motion or live action films, or making a day shoot look like nighttime. Then comes compositing, which is basically the layering of several different images into one finished composition. A few jobs compositing can include are green screen removal, rotoscope masking, and color correction. All that means is that the product's final result depends on the work the compositing artist does. In order for most films to be complete, we of course need audio. Now, normally animated films need to record character audio made by voice actors, sound effects made or found by Foley artists, and sometimes even a musical score made by musicians. All the audio is typically mixed together by sound engineers. Audio recording can technically happen anytime between the production stage and the post-production stage, so it's difficult to say precisely when audio is actually recorded. One of the last things that need to happen is the editing and the final edit. Editing, as I'm referring to it, means putting all the clips and elements of the project together. Editing can and does happen throughout the entire production process. The edit is constantly being updated as the shots progress from pre-visualization and animatic to rough animation to the final render and then the final composite. However, the audio is combined with the visuals in post-production. The final edit of the animation, with audio and effects, is then exported and rendered as a film or whatever file the distributor requires. The final export wraps up the post-production stage, meaning that the entire animation is finally finished. Now, not all of these steps are followed exactly by every single animation creator out there, but it is the general structure of creating an animated film. I hope I was able to give you some insight into the differences and similarities of the animation production processes of 2D and 3D animation with this video. Just as a little recap, 2D animation is done in 2 dimensions and is mostly hand-drawn, whereas 3D animation is done using simulated 3D space and 3D models. The production process is typically split into 3 different phases, which are pre-production, production, and post-production. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching my video. It would be really helpful if you could fill out this quick feedback survey in the link below. Oh, by the way, the style of this video was inspired by both the video style of Psych2Go on YouTube and a little bit Crash Course, which is also on YouTube. And it has been made over the course of the last 3 to 4 months. I decided to animate this video using good old 2D animation because 1, it's much easier for me to understand in a short amount of time, and 2, if I tried to create this video using 3D, my laptop would just simply explode. So here, I'll just show you really quickly. As you can see, it's not oh no, what's happening?